The first step off the jet bridge was like crossing a border. Behind her, the hushed luxury of LAX Private Lounge, a sanctuary of espresso machines humming quietly, newspapers folded crisply, and travelers who moved with the rehearsed grace of privilege. Ahead of her, the sterile galley of Orifly Flight 212, its chrome counters gleaming, its air perfumed with recycled sterility and faintly burnt coffee. Dr. Serafina Dubois, dressed in tailored charcoal trousers, a black cashmere sweater, and understated leather loafers, stepped onto the plane with the quiet poise of someone used to room stopping for her, even if no one here knew it yet. She adjusted the strap of her worn leather satchel, the only bag she carried, and gave the briefest of nods to the flight attendants in the galley. A simple courtesy, nothing more. But courtesy was not what she received in return. One of the attendants, a blonde woman with a severe bob haircut and eyes like frosted glass, shifted deliberately into her path, blocking the narrow entrance to the first-class cabin. She didn't smile. She didn't even pretend to. Her name tag caught the overhead light. Brenda. Good morning, Serafina offered evenly, her voice measured. Just heading to my seat. Brenda's gaze flicked down and up, a slow inventory that landed with judgment. She didn't step aside. Instead, her lips curved into something between suspicion and disdain. May I see your boarding pass? It wasn't a question. It was a challenge, issued loud enough that the passengers trickling behind Serafina could hear. A murmur stirred in the line. People craned their necks. Phones tilted, subtle but unmistakable. Screens already recording. Serafina held out her phone, the boarding pass glowing bright. Seat 1A, first class. The QR code pulsed green, indisputable. Brenda leaned in, squinting theatrically, as if the text required deciphering. I think there might be a mistake. I don't believe so, Serafina said calmly. The gate agent confirmed it not 2 minutes ago. The system's been acting up all morning, Brenda retorted, waving a dismissive hand. Things get jumbled. Economy is to the right down the main cabin. The words landed like a slap, spoken with the kind of smug finality that expected obedience. Behind Serafina, a businessman in a tailored blazer huffed impatiently. Can we move this along? He muttered, not to Brenda, but at Serafina. A heat pressed against Serafina's chest, not of anger, but of weariness. She had felt this heat before. First as a scholarship student at Harvard, the only black woman in a sea of entitled confidence. Later as a young executive dismissed in boardrooms until she made a point so irrefutable it cut through condescension like glass. She had hoped, foolishly, that billions of dollars in contracts and ownership of companies would inoculate her against these moments. It hadn't. My pass says 1A, she said, her voice steady, her chin high. Please scan it. You'll see it's correct. The junior attendant beside Brenda, Chloe, according to her name tag, shifted nervously. She looked barely out of training, her eyes darting between Serafina's calm expression and Brenda's growing hostility. For a heartbeat, Chloe seemed on the verge of stepping in. Then she dropped her gaze, lips sealed. Brenda sighed, sharp, exaggerated, designed for an audience. Honey, I've been doing this for 15 years. I can tell when there's a mix-up. First class is full. Now if you'll excuse me. She made to brush past Serafina, to herd her down the aisle like cattle toward the economy cabin. Serafina didn't move. She was still immovable, an elegant obstacle in trousers and cashmere. My seat is 1A, she said again. This time, her voice carried a steely undercurrent that sliced through the tension in the galley. The businessman behind her stopped muttering. Even Chloe's breath caught. Something in that quiet conviction forced Brenda's hand. With a huff, she yanked the scanner from her belt, snatched Serafina's phone, and swiped across. The scanner beeped. A green light flashed. Seat 1A confirmed. For a split second, Brenda's face faltered. The facts had exposed her. But prejudice rarely retreats gracefully. Her jaw tightened, her expression hardened, and she shoved the phone back. Like I said, the system's faulty, she muttered. That seat's already occupied. You'll have to speak to the gate agent. It was a lie. A bold, shameless lie. Before Serafina could respond, A man with thinning gray hair and the weariness of too many flights stepped out from the cabin. His name tag read Robert Purser. Is there a problem here? This passenger, Brenda said quickly, seizing the chance to spin her version, is insisting on a seat that's already taken. Her pass is clearly a glitch. Robert didn't ask to see the pass. Didn't check the manifest. He glanced at Serafina with a tired smile of false sympathy. Ma'am, I understand this is frustrating, he began, voice oozing condescension. Why don't we go back to the gate and get this sorted out? We can't hold up boarding. They weren't solving a problem. They were removing one. And in their eyes, she was a problem. No, Serafina said softly. Her calmness was sharper than any raised voice. We will be sorting this out right here. The standoff thickened the air. Behind her, the line of first-class passengers grew. An older woman in oversized sunglasses sighed theatrically. Another man chuckled under his breath. The humiliation was no longer private. It was performance. Let's be reasonable, Robert pressed. You're disrupting boarding. Reasonable, Serafina repeated, tilting her head. Her eyes sharpened, every inch the diagnostician she had been in boardrooms and acquisitions. My ticket is valid. Your scanner confirmed it. And yet I'm being denied the seat I paid for. Tell me, how do you think this looks to the other passengers? Robert faltered, just for a moment. Chloe looked like she wanted to disappear into the floor. Brenda's jaw clenched tighter. Finally, Serafina stepped past Brenda, unhurried, graceful, walking into the first-class cabin as though she were reclaiming territory. Row 1 spread out before her, for wide leather thrones and a herringbone layout. Seat 1A, the aisle, sat pristine and untouched, its blanket and pillow still sealed in plastic. Serafina stopped, turned, let the evidence speak for itself. Mr. Henderson in 1B, a grizzled businessman scrolling on his phone, looked up, smirked at the drama, then buried himself back in the screen. Brenda's face went red, blotchy patches blooming across her cheeks. Her lie had been stripped bare, and yet she still reached for another absurd fabrication. That seat, he needs the extra space. We were saving it for him. Even Henderson looked baffled. I don't need 2 seats, he muttered. Robert stepped forward, face darkening with false authority. Ma'am, you need to come with us. You're creating a disturbance. A disturbance? Serafina's voice dropped to a near whisper, carrying more power than Brenda's shrill protests. I presented a valid ticket. You lied to me twice. You attempted to humiliate me in front of other passengers. And now you accuse me of disruption. The silence in the cabin was suffocating. Every passenger's eyes were fixed on her. Phones were raised higher now, recording everything. And then Brenda snapped. That's it. You're a security risk. Captain, the nuclear option. A moment later, the cockpit door opened. Captain Miller, tall, gray-mustached, radiating authority, stepped into the aisle. What's the problem here? Brenda pounced. This woman forced her way in. She doesn't have a valid ticket for this seat. She's refusing to cooperate. Miller's gaze landed on Serafina, like she was malfunctioning equipment. Cold, impersonal. You have 2 options, he said flatly. Accept a seat in Economy Plus or leave the aircraft. We'll rebook you on another flight. What's it going to be? The crew gathered behind him. Brenda smug, Robert relieved, Chloe pale with dread. Passengers whispered, filmed, judged. The humiliation was complete. Serafina held the captain's gaze for a long, unbroken moment. He expected pleading, anger, perhaps tears. Instead, she gave a single nod. I understand perfectly, she said. She turned toward the open door of the aircraft. To the crew, it looked like surrender. Brenda's smile returned, sharp as a knife. But at the galley threshold, Serafina paused. She reached into her satchel and drew out a phone, not the slim rectangle consumer tech, but a matte black satellite model, built for war zones and oil rigs. She pressed one number. The cabin hushed, passengers leaning forward to catch the words. James, she said, her voice cutting through the recycled air like a blade. Cut. If you are enjoying this story, please subscribe to support the channel. The word hung in the galley like a loaded weapon. James. It was spoken so softly passengers in row 2 almost leaned forward to catch it. The name was unfamiliar to them, but the way she said it, calm, clipped absolute, made the air itself tense. On the other end of the world, in a command center in Reston, Virginia, James Whitaker sat bolt upright in front of 3 glowing monitors. He had worked for Dr. Serafina Dubois for nearly a decade. He knew the sound of her voice in every register. Curious, amused, razor-sharp in negotiation. But this tone, quiet, controlled, glacial, was one he had only heard twice before. Once, during a Department of Defense contract collapse that threatened billions. Once, when a server meltdown nearly erased a decade of research. This was her crisis voice. "I'm on Aurafly 212, boarding at LAX Gate 154. She said evenly, her back to the cabin, her gaze fixed on the reflection of the smug crew in the polished steel of a coffee urn. "Initiate code Indigo." For a beat, James didn't move. His fingers hovered above the keyboard. The words were theoretical. Code Indigo had lived in training binders, in contingency slides for worst-case scenarios. He had never expected to hear them spoken. "Confirmed?" he asked, his voice already taut with motion. "Confirmed." The pause broke. His hands flew. Screens lit up. Secure channels activated. Back on the aircraft, Brenda crossed her arms. "Really?" she scoffed, her voice dripping with contempt. "Calling your husband? Your lawyer? Whoever James is, honey, he can't help you here. You're done." Passengers chuckled nervously, some shaking their heads. The businessman in row 3 muttered, "This is ridiculous." Serafina didn't turn. She didn't dignify Brenda with a glance. Instead, she listened to the faint electronic hiss of the satellite line as James's voice sharpened. "Ground stop initiated. FAA notified. Tower control flagged. Flight 212 locked at gate." Her lips curved almost imperceptibly. "Thank you, James. Now bring me David Chun. 5 minutes." On it. She ended the call. And then it began. The first jolt. In the cockpit, Captain Miller's headset crackled with urgency. "Aurafly 212. This is ground control. Do not push back. Repeat, you are under ground stop." Miller frowned. "Ground stop? On what basis?" "We're clear. Order originates from corporate headquarters," the tower replied, flat and clipped. "Override Priority Alpha." Miller stiffened. Priority Alpha? That was top-level executive override. He turned, baffled, toward Robert and Brenda, who stood frozen. Passengers felt the shift immediately. The engines, which had started to rumble faintly, powered down. The jet bridge, which had begun retracting, shuddered back into place. Phones lifted higher. Murmurs rippled down the aisle. "Why are we stopping? What's going on? Priority Alpha? What does that mean?" Serafina turned then, facing the cabin, her expression still composed. She didn't speak. She didn't need to. The silence around her was its own statement. The realization begins. The gate agent, Kevin, the same young man who had welcomed her warmly into the lounge, appeared breathless at the galley entrance. His tie was crooked, his tablet clutched with white-knuckled hands. "Captain Robert," his voice cracked. "Red flag directive from HQ just hit. Code Indigo. All operations suspended." "Indigo?" Robert repeated, color draining from his face. Kevin's eyes scanned the galley, landing on Serafina. His voice faltered. It says, all crew must comply with passenger Dr. Serafina Dubois." Immediately, without question, silence detonated in the cabin. Passengers exchanged sharp glances. The businessman who had smirked earlier dropped his phone to his lap, stunned. Brenda's mouth opened, then closed. Her eyes darted to Serafina, then back to Robert, seeking rescue. None came. "You," Kevin whispered, pointing at Serafina with dawning horror. "You're her?" Serafina inclined her head once. Nothing theatrical, just confirmation. The name struck the crew like a physical blow. Dubois, founder of Ethereum Dynamics, rumored billionaire. The shadow name whispered in industry chatter, the woman whose company had, quietly, just acquired Orifly. The humiliation they had so gleefully inflicted had just transformed into corporate suicide, the corporate cavalry. The sound of expensive shoes hammering the jet bridge broke the silence. Moments later, 3 men in suits burst breathlessly into the galley. At their front, David Chun, COO of Orifly. His normally immaculate silver hair was damp with sweat. His tie hung askew, his eyes wild. Dr. Du Bois. He gasped her name like a prayer, skidding to a halt in front of her. My God, I came as soon as I got the call. I am so profoundly sorry. This is catastrophic. Please allow me to. He bent slightly, words tumbling, the sight of a king bowing to an empress. Passengers' jaws dropped. Some gasped audibly. Phones captured every second, every angle. Brenda staggered back, her face collapsing into disbelief. Robert looked pale, like the blood had been siphoned from his body. Captain Miller's jaw flexed, as though the entire foundation of his authority had been cracked wide open. Serafina said nothing. She only checked her watch. For minutes left, the human reactions. Passengers whispered urgently. Wait, she's the owner? She bought Orifly? Oh my God, they humiliated her. The older woman in sunglasses leaned toward the aisle, lips parted in astonishment. Even Henderson in 1B, previously aloof, lowered his phone slowly, finally meeting Serafina's gaze with reluctant respect. Brenda tried to speak, her voice shaking. I didn't know. No, Serafina interrupted softly, her first word since the reveal. Her tone was glacial, the kind that froze excuses midair. You didn't care. Brenda's face broke. The countdown. In Reston, James's voice returned in her earpiece through the satellite phone. Board is assembled. 3 minutes to connection. Patch me through when ready, she replied. David Chun, frantic, tried to fill the silence. Dr. Du Bois, I take full responsibility for this disaster. Please believe me, this does not reflect our culture. She lifted a hand. A simple, calm gesture. He fell silent instantly. Her eyes moved over crew. Not a word, just observation. Clinical, surgical. And in that silence, the cabin shifted. For the first time since she stepped aboard, she was not the problem. She was the axis, the center of gravity. The power they had dismissed now held them in orbit. The humiliation had inverted. And it was only the beginning. Silence is not the absence of sound. It is a presence, heavy, watchful, attentive. On Orifly 212, it pulled in the aisles and hung from the overhead bins, visible in the way people held their breath and stared over seatbacks with unapologetic curiosity. Bored in 2 minutes, James's voice murmured through the satellite line clipped at Serafina's hip. Stand by, she replied, then clicked the line to mute. She turned to face the galley like a lecturer stepping to a podium. No raised voice. No flourish. The authority came from precision, the way surgeons use scalpels, not hammers. Let's review the last 10 minutes, she said, conversational, almost gentle. Not as drama, as operations. Brenda reflexively crossed her arms, a wall already crumbling. Robert, the purser, tried to make himself smaller. Captain Miller stood at parade rest, jaw clenched, pride scaffolding a structure that had already been condemned. Chloe wiped her eyes with the back of her hand and stared at the non-slip floor. Input, Serafina said, tapping her own wristwatch, was a scanned, paid boarding pass for seat 1A. Device confirmation, green. Output was denial, public challenge, and escalation to an ultimatum without verification. That mismatch is where culture exposes itself. She looked to Brenda first. Ms. Hollis, walk me through your decision tree. Brenda swallowed. I believed. First class was. You began with a belief? Serafina said, not unkindly. Not a check. Belief about me. My clothes. My face. Brenda flinched. The word face was a quiet bell tolling through the cabin. You had a scanner. Serafina continued. A tool for truth. Why did you not use it immediately? Brenda stared past her, at a point on the bulkhead. The system failed yesterday. 2 misreads. I was just trying to keep the flow moving. The flow, Serafina said. Yes. Tell me, when the scanner confirmed my seat, why did you choose a new narrative instead of a new behavior? Brenda's mouth opened and closed. Nothing. Passengers shifted. The human sound of a courtroom learning a new kind of cross-examination. Here is your error rate. Serafina said, eyes steady. You replace process with instinct. Instinct steeped in bias presents as certainty. It is always more confident than it is correct. Brenda blinked hard. I made a mistake, she whispered. The mistake began earlier, Serafina said, when you decided I did not belong. Everything after that was maintenance of a story you liked more than facts. She pivoted to Robert. Mr. Miller, leadership. Robert swallowed. I was trying to de-escalate. You did none of the 3 pillars of de-escalation, she said. Verify, clarify, contain. You did not check my pass or the manifest. You accepted a report from a subordinate without interrogating the logic. You moved the conflict into public view, transforming a solvable problem into a spectacle. Robert's cheeks went pale. I followed procedure. No, she said softly. You followed pressure. She let the distinction hang. Pressure tells you whom to appease. Procedure tells you what is true. A rustle in the cabin, someone whispered, damn. Another voice, she's reading them for filth. A third, this is better than any TED Talk. Henderson in 1B lowered his eyes, chastened by his own earlier smirk. She faced the captain, Captain Miller. He straightened, ready for impact. Pilot in command, he said, as if the title were a shield. It is, she granted, a shield for everyone on board, including me. She didn't blink. What investigative steps did you take before issuing your ultimatum? He inhaled. I was told by my crew. Third hand, she said, from a crew member who did not verify. She tilted her head. If a mechanic told you an engine was fine, but had not opened the panel, would you push back? He bristled. This is not the same. It is exactly the same. You accepted an uninspected report. You used your authority to remove the variable that annoyed you most instead of isolating the variable that mattered. Authority without curiosity is hazard. Captain. He looked past her, over her shoulder, into a distance only he could see. Something brittle gave way in his posture. He did not argue again. A soft sniffle. Chloe. Serafina turned to her last. Ms. Martinez. Chloe's voice trembled. I knew it was wrong. And you were silent, Serafina said, not cruelly, because you are junior, because correction is often punished more reliably than misconduct. She took one measured step closer. This is the only place your colleagues may teach you something useful. You always pay a price. Today you learned the cost of silence. Tears slid helplessly down Chloe's face. She nodded once, as if accepting a sentence she had already anticipated. From the jet bridge, the fast, clipped steps of security. They didn't enter, not yet. They waited, professionals reading a scene that belonged to someone else. David's chin shifted, the COO's instinct to fill silence battling a survival instinct in the presence of superior predator. Bored in 30 seconds, James murmured. Unmute me on connection, she said. Speaker. She turned to the passengers. To those recording, she said, meeting lenses the way she would meet eyes, archive your footage. Do not publish until you have the facts. A single viral moment is a poor substitute for the whole story. I will give you context after we fix the plane you're on and the culture that runs it. A few people lowered their phones. Not many, but some. It was enough. The satellite phone chimed, a soft, crystalline chord that cut the cabin's hum like a scalpel. On its tiny screen, bored, connected. Good morning, Serafina said, voice steady, pitched to carry without rising. Dr. Du Bois. We are live. Dr. Du Bois. Came a chorus of voices, tinny and reverent through the line. We're here. Copy your presence, she said. We are at LAX, Gate 154. Flight 212. We have a Level 1 culture breach with business risks across safety, legal, and brand. I will summary the chain, then specify corrective action. David Chin stood to the side, hands clasped, the posture of a man witnessing both disaster and salvation. Inbound stimulus. She began, eyes never leaving the crew. Ticketed passenger presents. Verification device confirms. Crew substitutes visual assessment for process. Denial. Leadership fails to interrogate claim. Escalation. Command authority engages without inquiry. Coercive resolution. She let each phrase land. Behind her, an infant 2 rows back gurgled, life ordinary and indifferent. Up front, 40 adults barely breathed. Consequence, she said. Public humiliation of a paying customer, myself. Under brand livery. Risk of unlawful removal. Exposure to litigation. Erosion of safety culture by normalizing unverified decision-making. She paused. Secondary harm. Training signal to junior staff that silence is safe. Somewhere on the line, a board member exhaled. Recommendations? Another asked immediately, as if they'd learned long ago that she never arrived without them. Immediate, she said. Suspend involved crew pending determination. Replace crew to complete transport. Apologize to passengers. Refund fares. Issue round-trip vouchers. File incident with FAA proactively to avoid narrative vacuum. Passengers traded looks. The magnitude of what she was offering, refunds, free trips, rolled to the cabin like a soft shockwave. Near term, she continued, we initiate a 2-year complaint audit to identify pattern risk. Install anonymous reporting with anti-retaliation guarantees. Mandate verify/clarify/contain training across in-flight operations. Update captain SOP checklist to trigger verification steps before passenger relocation. Aboard voice, budget? Budget is cheaper than lawsuits, she said, and cheaper than a culture that breaks against the first contact with difference. Silence on the line. Not disagreement, calculation. Dr. Du Bois, another voice said, older, cautious. And these individuals? She looked at each crew member in turn, as if taking their measurements one last time. Findings, she said, each name a metronome tick. Brenda Hollis, customer experience lead, initiated bias-driven denial, fabricated occupancy, resisted correction after device verification. Risk, brand and legal. Corrective action, termination for cause. Brenda's hand flew to her mouth. A small, wounded sound escaped. Less protest and the breath knocked from her body. Robert Miller, purser. Chose narrative over manifest. Escalated publicly. Failed de-escalation protocol. Risk, systemic. Corrective action, termination for cause. Robert didn't speak. He stared at the carpet, the universe of his employment collapsing down to the weave. Captain John Miller, pilot in command, issued ultimatum without investigation. Accepted hearsay over verification. Risk, safety culture. Corrective action, removal from duty pending review. Termination for cause recommended. A flicker of anger crossed the captain's face, then left as cleanly as a shadow crossing a dial. Chloe Martinez, junior attendant, recognized misconduct, remained silent. Risk, culture signal. Corrective action, written censure. Retraining. Probation with mentorship under a senior person not named today. Chloe's shoulders shook once, then steadied. Her yes was a whisper. No one heard but her. David, she said, turning at last to the COO. You'll own execution. Security is staged. Yes, he said, voice raw. At the bridge. On my mark, she said to the phone. Board, any objection? The line gave back only static and the way to consent. Then we proceed, she said. She clicked the satellite line to mute. The cabin seemed to lean toward her, an entire fuselage tipping into the gravity of a single person. She stepped one pace closer to the crew. Not triumphal, final. Ms. Hollis, she said, eyes level. Mr. Miller. Captain. Ms. Martinez. Effective immediately. The intercom crackled. For a second, Brenda flinched like a reprieve might pour from the ceiling. Instead, Kevin's voice arrived from the doorway, small and stunned. Security is ready. Your employment with Orifly and with any subsidiary of Ethereum Dynamics is terminated for cause. Serafina finished unblinking. Credentials revoked. You will surrender badges now and accompany security. There will be no severance. Air moved again. It sounded like 40 people exhaling all at once. Brenda shook her head, tears carving bright paths down her cheeks. Please. I'm not, I didn't mean. You meant it at the time, Serafina said, not cruel, not kind. Intention is a luxury truth cannot afford. Robert's lips formed a thank you that had nowhere to go. The captain nodded once, stiff, square, the last salute a soldier who understood a verdict when he heard it. Chloe pressed both palms to her apron, absorbing the shape of the word probation, like it might be the first solid thing she'd touched all day. Security stepped forward. Badges clipped free with tiny plastic pops. Civilian handcuffs made of lanyards and consequences. The satellite phone chimed again, bored, awaiting confirmation, and she raised it to her mouth. Action complete, she said. Proceed to remediation. The line acknowledged. David Chun reached for the intercom, awaiting her nod like a penitent awaiting mass. She did not give it yet. She looked once down the aisle, past faces and phones, past blankets and plastic-wrapped headphones, to the sealed window at 1A where daylight struck the wing at a clean angle, bright, unsentimental. This is not punishment culture, she said to no one and to everyone. This is repair. Then she nodded to David. The PA clicked live. Ladies and gentlemen, he began, voice steadier now. On behalf of Orifly, the door to the jet bridge opened. The longest walk of 4 lives began. And in the quiet eye of it, Serafina checked her watch. 5 minutes. Exactly. Act 4, the reveal and the reckoning. The jet bridge yawned open, spilling fluorescent light into the galley. Security officers in navy blazers, calm, expressionless, stepped inside. They carried no weapons, only the invisible weight of finality. Brenda's sobs echoed, raw and ragged, shattering the hushed cabin. She clutched her badge with white-knuckled desperation. Please. You can't. This isn't. I need this job. Serafina didn't flinch. You needed integrity more. Robert handed his badge over without protest. Shoulders slumped like a man decades older than his body. He muttered, almost inaudible, I was just trying to get through the day. That is a failure, Serafina said, her voice quiet but merciless. Your passengers do not fly through your day. They entrust you with theirs. Captain Miller's hand lingered on his lanyard, knuckles white. When he unclipped it, he held it out like a soldier surrendering his sword. You'll regret this, he hissed, pride leaking out like steam from cracked metal. No, Serafina replied, eyes locking on his. What I would regret is leaving a culture like yours intact. Only Chloe hesitated, trembling, her badge still pinned. Serafina's gaze softened just slightly. Ms. Martinez, you will stay. But remember, silence costs more than a job. It costs lives. Chloe swallowed hard, nodding, tears streaking her cheeks. The officers led the disgraced trio down the jet bridge. Brenda wept openly, mascara trailing down her face. Robert shuffled like a ghost. Captain Miller walked tall, chin high, fury stiffening his posture. Passengers craned their necks to watch them go, whispering into phones, documenting history. The door sealed behind them with a hollow metallic finality. The balance of power shifted with an audible click. A cabin held breathless. David Chun, the COO, clutched the intercom mic, waiting. His face glistened with sweat, but his eyes flicked constantly to Serafina, every muscle taut with deference. He was no longer in command of anything. Speak, Serafina said simply. Chun nodded and pressed the button. Ladies and gentlemen, this is Orifly's Chief Operating Officer. On behalf of our airline, I offer my most sincere apology for the unacceptable incident you have just witnessed. Effective immediately, the crew members responsible have been removed from duty. A replacement crew is en route to ensure we depart as soon as possible. A ripple of stunned murmurs traveled through the cabin. To express our regret, Chin continued, every passenger on Flight 212 will receive a full refund of your ticket cost and a complimentary round-trip voucher in the cabin class you purchased. These credits will be deposited into your accounts within 48 hours. Gasps. A woman in 2D clapped a hand over her mouth. A man in row 3 muttered, Holy hell. Henderson in 1B blinked at his phone, his smirk long gone, replaced with awe. Passengers began to applaud, hesitant at first, then swelling, a ragged chorus of relief and astonishment. Some filmed, some cheered, some simply stared at Serafina, like she was a figure conjured out of myth. Chen's hand trembled as he released the intercom. He turned, awaiting her next directive, the executive cleanup. "Now," Serafina said, her tone returning to its cool executive cadence. "We address remediation." She turned, not to the passengers, but to the invisible board still tethered by satellite line. "You heard the directive. Passenger restitution is underway. Next steps: full audit of hiring, training, and complaint management. I want data on bias-related incidents from the past 2 years, and I want it collated by severity and recurrence. Delivery by Monday, 9 a.m. Yes, Dr. Du Bois." A voice echoed faintly from her earpiece. "Additionally," she continued, eyes steady, "an anonymous reporting channel must be live within 30 days. Incentivize whistleblowers with protection. Punish retaliation harshly. A silent culture is a complicit culture." Chin scribbled frantically in a leather notebook, nodding with every word. Finally, she said, "Captain Command Protocols. Verification must precede coercion. I want SOP revisions drafted and implemented fleet-wide within 60 days. "Yes," Chin stammered. "We'll make it happen." Her gaze snapped to him. "You won't make it happen, David. You will own it. This culture changes or you resign." He froze, then nodded quickly. "Owned. Understood." The junior attendant. Passengers were still buzzing, murmurs ricocheting down the cabin like sparks. But Serafina turned her focus back to Chloe. "You remained silent when you should have spoken," Serafina said, voice level. "And yet you looked uneasy. That matters. Fear means you knew what was right. Remember this day, Ms. Martinez. Next time you will not be afraid. You will be accountable." Chloe's lip quivered. "Yes, Dr. Du Bois. I understand." "Good," Serafina said, the faintest hint of grace entering her tone. "Then you may still grow here." Passengers nodded approvingly. Some even smiled at the young attendant, as though rooting for her redemption, the cultural surgery. Serafina turned back to the cabin at large. Dozens of eyes, strangers, executives, skeptics, and allies alike, watched her. Some had judged her unworthy minutes earlier. Now they sat spellbound. "Understand this," she said, her words crisp, carrying over the muted roar of the idle engines. This was not about one seat. It was about a system. Systems rot from habits. Habits rot from unchecked assumptions. Today, this aircraft was infected with arrogance, bias, and cowardice. Left alone, those infections metastasize until they corrode safety, brand, and trust. No one moved. Even Henderson in 1B set his phone down. "My role," she continued, "is not to punish. It is to excise, painfully if necessary, publicly if unavoidable, but always completely. Because I do not buy companies to own them. I buy them to fix them." A silence followed, thick and reverent. Then, unexpectedly, a passenger in row 4 began to clap. Another joined. Soon the sound grew, a rolling applause that filled the cabin. Not polite, not performative. Gratitude, awe, relief. The replacement crew. The jet bridge door opened again. This time, it was not security, but a fresh flight crew, led by a new person in her 40s with sharp eyes and calm energy. They moved like surgeons entering an operating room. Crisp, efficient, wordless. The new purser approached Serafina's seat. She inclined her head respectfully. "Dr. Du Bois, my name is Maria. It is an honor to serve you. Please know that my crew and I are here to ensure this flight proceeds with dignity and safety." "Thank you, Maria," Serafina said softly. "A bottle of water and an on-time arrival will suffice." Maria nodded once, crisp as a salute, then turned to her team. Within seconds, they were moving through the aisles, assisting passengers, their professionalism a stark contrast to the chaos before. Passengers exchanged glances, tension dissolving into relief, settling in. At last, Serafina returned to seat 1A. The pillow and blanket remained sealed, untouched symbols of the absurdity that had begun this ordeal. She placed her leather satchel in the overhead bin and lowered herself into the seat with quiet finality. From a corner of her eye, she saw the woman in sunglasses, once impatient, tilt her head in a small, respectful nod. Across the aisle, Henderson muttered, almost sheepishly, "Good for you." Serafina didn't answer. She simply adjusted her watch and exhaled. Davidson hovered nervously near the galley. "Dr. Du Bois, anything else?" "Only this," she said, eyes fixed out the window where sunlight glinted on the wing. "Sent a memo tonight. Title it Zero Tolerance. Infinite Accountability. Make sure every employee reads it before they report for duty." "Yes, Dr. Du Bois," he said quickly. The final word. The engines hummed back to life. The jet bridge retracted once more. This time, no one dared to stop it. As the aircraft began its slow pushback, Serafina closed her eyes, not in triumph, not in satisfaction, but in the weary acceptance of surgeon after the first incision. This was not victory. This was repair. What had just happened would ripple across headlines, boardrooms, and union halls within hours. Careers had ended. A culture had been cut open. The real work, rebuilding, was only beginning. But for now, with the applause still echoing faintly in her ears, Serafina allowed herself one long, steady breath. She had not humiliated them. They had humiliated themselves. All she had done was reveal it, 5 minutes at a time. Night does not fall all at once at 38,000 feet. It glides along the fuselage, tinting the wing a slow gradient of ink. Somewhere over Utah, the cabin lights softened to amber. Somewhere over Nebraska, the hush that follows a storm finally settled. Flight 212 flew, on time, intact, and probably serene. The new crew moved like a single organism. Safety checks clicked into place with the audible comfort of good engineering. Drinks poured. A child in 5A fell asleep with a plastic set of wings pinned slightly crooked to his sweatshirt. Refund emails dinged into inboxes, followed by the promise of a free round trip. Tiny digital bells confirming that the apology had weight. In 1A, Serafina Du Bois slid her tablet from the seat pocket and didn't turn it on. The glow outside the window, thin lunar blade, scattered city constellations far below, proved more useful than charts or memos. She wasn't tired so much as emptied. Decisive action is its own kind of exhaustion. Maria, the new purser, paused at her armrest, voice low. "Dr. Du Bois, still water, as requested. And thank you." "For what?" Serafina asked. "For making it clear what the standard is." Maria said, "It's rare." Serafina inclined her head. Standards save lives before they ever save brands. Maria's smile flickered in the dim. "Yes, ma'am." She melted back into the aisle, distributing small mercies. Blankets straightened, fears eased, dignity returned. Across the aisle, Henderson in 1B cleared his throat. The smirk was gone for good. "Ms. Dr. Du Bois," he said, not quite meeting her eyes, "I behaved like a spectator at a car crash. That wasn't decent. I apologize." She considered him, then nodded once. Then the day wasn't a waste. He let out a breath he'd been holding for hours. "If you ever need an amicus brief from a repentant corporate attorney, I need citizens who verify before they amplify," she said. "Start there." Further back, the woman in sunglasses had removed them. She signaled shyly with her cup as if offering a toast. Serafina returned the gesture with her water bottle. That was enough. Phones remained out. Of course they did, but the mood had shifted from spectacle to witness. A few passengers drafted long captions and then deleted them, choosing for once to think before posting. Others wrote emails to themselves, subject line, "When I should have spoken up." Humans rearranged themselves around a new gravity. Her satellite phone buzzed once at her hip, discreet as a knock on a study door. "James." She answered without leaving the window. "Report." "Ground front status," he said, voice warm with relief now that the immediate crisis had passed. "Security logs complete. HR drafting terminations. Legal has preemptive filings for the FAA. Media monitoring flagging chatter, but contained your archive before published line actually worked on surprising number of passengers. Good. The board sends unanimous support. Budget unlocked for training, audit, and the anonymous channel. David is very motivated. He should be. She let silence breathe for a beat. Schedule the investor call for Monday, 8 a.m. Eastern. Title at Culture is a safety system. Already on the calendar. And the memo? Drafted, zero tolerance. Infinite accountability. Would you like to? Send it now, she said. Shift workers read at weird hours. Let them find it on break. Done. A pause. Softer. How are you? She watched the wing card night from night. Aligned. Copy that. She ended the call and finally powered the tablet. Not the proposal. A blank note. Lessons, 212. Bias escalates faster than fact when unchecked. Procedure is not a suggestion. It's a seatbelt for judgment. Silence is a compliance mechanism. Break it on purpose. Apologies cost, or they don't count. Authority without curiosity is hazard. She set the tablet aside. The jet hummed. The world, stitched together by flight paths and expectations, felt just at this hour, capable of repair. Ripples. By the time the cabin drifted towards sleep, ripples fanned outward from 212 like concentric rings on black water. In a break room at SFO, a night crew read the memo aloud between bites of vending machine pretzels. Someone said, "About damn time," and tacked the printout over the schedule, alignment pinning accountability to cork. In a union office in Queens, a rep underlined the sentence. Verify before coerce, and muttered, "We'll hold them to that." And then, after beat, "Will hold us to it, too." Demands and reforms share more DNA than most adversaries admit. In a tiny apartment in Long Beach, Chloe Martinez sat on the edge of her bed, uniform folded into a precise square, eyes swollen from crying. Probation felt like a lifeline and a mirror. She texted her mother 3 words. "I almost failed." She followed with 4 more. "I won't next time." She set an alarm for dawn and added, "Look for Maria on the bid list. Learn from her." In a condo overlooking the marina, Brenda stared at her reflection until she could not deny the shape of it. The righteous script had burned away. What remained was uncomfortable and true. She opened an old laptop and typed, "Implicit bias training near me," then hesitated, then clicked, then registered. Consequence had finally accomplished what comfort never would. The purser, Robert, sat alone in his parked car, hands on the wheel, astonished at how quiet the city could sound when one's role in it vanishes. He replayed the morning. Every moment he could have verified and didn't. When he finally turned the key, it was to drive to his father's nursing facility. He signed in, then asked the nurse about protocols he'd never bothered to learn. Procedure is not cruelty, he thought. Fastening a visitor badge. It is care codified. Captain Miller poured a drink he didn't need and stared at his frame type, rating like it might blink. He took the license down not as a resignation, but as a thing that needed context beyond a wall. He laid it on the table beside a blank sheet of paper and, after a long time, wrote, "Curiosity checklist." The pen moved slowly at first, then steady. The investor call. 2 days later, at 8 a.m. Eastern, the investor call opened with a title slide that surprised no one and yet felt like a small revolution. Culture is a safety system. "Good morning," Serafina said, voice clean as glass. "We had an incident on Flight 212. I won't euphemize it. We had a culture breach that intersected with safety. We corrected it in minutes and began repairs in hours. You will see spending Q3 on training, audits, and reporting. You will also see fewer lawsuits and more loyalty. That is not PR, it is a risk model." She laid out the plan like an engineer. Inputs, outputs, redundancies. Investor questions followed, mostly about cost. She answered them, but not with apologies. No one on the call doubted a hand on the yoke. Afterwards, a journalist emailed for comment. She sent 2 sentences. "Our customers are not variables to be minimized. They are the purpose of the system. And we will verify before we coerce." The quotes circulated. Not viral, just durable. The airport gate. At JFK, Flight 212 arrived to a gate crew that had already read the memo twice. The jet bridge locked with soft embrace. Doors whooshed open. Morning Sun, sharp and democratic, climbed aboard. Maria stood at the forward door with her team, posture poised but relaxed, a portrait of competence unburdened by performance. As passengers disembarked, they thanked her by name, like she'd always been theirs. Henderson paused beside 1A. "I'll think before I laugh next time," he said. She didn't reward him with a smile. She did, however, believe him. The woman without sunglasses squeezed Serafina's hand. "Just once, quick. For my daughter," she whispered. "To see someone like you, thank you." "For your daughter," Serafina said, and meant it. When the aisle finally cleared, Davidson appeared again, a little less sallow, a little more certain. "Dr. Du Bois," he said, bracing for a new directive. "Two," she said. "First, publish an internal case study, anonymous passengers, redacted names. But keep the timestamps and the failure points. Don't hide what broke. People respect what they can measure." He nodded, scribbling. "Second, launch a mentorship ladder. Pair senior staff like Maria with juniors like Chloe. Pay for the extra time. Make it prestigious to be good." "Done," he said, and for the first time since LAX. It sounded like a promise he owned. "And David," she added, softer, "make room for your people to be right when you are tired. The rot begins with fatigue wearing a leader's face." He swallowed. "Yes." She stepped into the jet bridge. The terminal's ordinary chaos. Rolling bags, announcements, a toddler's delighted shriek at a moving walkway, swept around her. The world had not changed because of a single flight, but angles had shifted. Expectations had moved. Somewhere, a line that once bent now held. Her driver waited beyond security. Paparazzi hadn't arrived. Perhaps they never would. That was fine. She wasn't building a myth. She was tuning a system. On the ride into the city, she dictated a final note to herself. Standard operating principle. Justice is what process looks like when practiced without prejudice. Apology is what leadership sounds like when spoken with cost. Power is the quiet permission to fix things now, not later. She closed her eyes and felt the car glide through traffic like a plane through clean air. For a brief, luxurious moment, she allowed the weight to lift. Then she opened her eyes, because work remains and always will. At headquarters, a printout of the memo already hung crooked on a bulletin board. She straightened it without comment. Later, alone in her office, she set the paddock on the desk and watched the second-hand sweep. Unbothered, exact, incapable of lying. 5 minutes had rewritten an airline story. 5 years would write its future. She checked her watch, not for the time, but for the standard it kept. True authority, she knew, doesn't humiliate and doesn't bluff. It verifies, corrects, and sets a bar you can feel in your bones. She stood, gathered her satchel, and walked toward the conference room where a dozen people waited to be changed. Not revenge. Governance. If you like this story, please subscribe to support this channel.